All right, let's get right into it. We don't have any time to waste. Neuro-linguistic programming, that's the language of your mind. It's like having a owner's manual for the mind, and it views addiction as an exhausted resource. So if anybody continues to use alcohol or any other substance after the first time, then that's because the first time they used it, nothing bad happened probably. And so things become resources for us. For me, alcohol was a resource for a while. Opioids were a resource for about 8 years. Benzos were a resource for a while, but eventually, with those substances, since I used those resources so much, I loved those resources. They really helped me. Yeah, there was pain and negative consequences, but for a long time with the pills and for a shorter time with alcohol, they were resources, subjective for making my life, have a net increase to my quality of life, having alcohol or one of those pills in there. But then the continuum of use, the more you use a resource, the more it becomes depleted, the more the negative consequences, side effects, and pain subjective that you experience from alcohol, for this example, then it can outweigh at first the pleasure and positive benefits. And then if you keep going, oftentimes it'll start to significantly outweigh the pain over the pleasure. And eventually the not only is the juice not worth the squeeze, but if you were to squeeze any juice, this juice basically poisons you and makes you unhealthy and makes you really feel bad about yourself and experience shame and guilt and all this crazy stuff. So, just because it's an exhausted resource, unfortunately, that doesn't mean that we're easily able to just quit once it's exhausted. Our brains still have this deep salience that we perceive. Salience, you can describe that as kind of the pain and the positive benefits that the pleasure that we, sorry, associate with something. But oftentimes, even after you have, like, here's a good example. When I first started using opioids, those pills got me so high, but I developed tolerance very, very quickly to the point where even though I used them as a resource recreationally for 8 years, because I never had a constant supply or constant money, so I never got addicted to them for 8 years. But those things gave me so much physical benefits and psychological benefits at the beginning. And they were like, wow. Okay. So towards the end of my opioid addiction, 8 years of using them as a resource, then they started to become exhausted once I had a constant supply and sort of constant money, consistent money, but low money, but it was every Friday. Then all of a sudden it started to, all the negative stuff started to greatly outweigh it. And I had such a tolerance and dependence to it, it wasn't even giving me the same benefits anymore. I could barely feel it. A lot of days I didn't even have enough money to feel it. I would just be kind of halfway sick and tired throughout the day, but avoided full withdrawal. So why did I keep trying to use, why would I quit and then get back on them all these times? Well, part of the reasons post-acute withdrawal, getting through that is really difficult. And so then what happens? You can't make it through pause because you have to go to work or take care of kids or both, school, all sorts of stuff. So you get back on the alcohol or the opioid. In my case, I would get back on both of those substances to give me energy and mental health to be able to, fulfill all my responsibilities, pay my bills and such. But I still had this powerful salience to opioids and in an early recovery, same thing with alcohol. And well, actually, no, alcohol, I had totally destroyed that when I quit. I was like so over that. But opioids, I still had thoughts to use, urges to use, and even maybe even cravings sometimes, several weeks and maybe even a couple months into it. Not cravings, a few months, but thoughts and urges for opioids still. And that's because my brain still perceived them with this high salience, their value basically as a resource. So when a resource has a high salience, even though your experience of that, for example, Randy's has been experiencing the kindling phenomenon. So the binges are shorter and recovering from the binges is way harder. And so, but even the other day, I remember Randy posted that something gnarly had happened and, he had a thought that drinking could be good, but he was able to squash it. The reason he thought that part of it was because he still has the salience that his brain associates to alcohol is a lot higher than the actual the actual result of using the alcohol. So our longing for it and like romancing or reminiscing fear of missing out about it is actually not accurate. It's not logical. It's this high salience that shouldn't be a high salience anymore. It should go down, but it doesn't. And then everyone has a unique map of reality. Everyone has a unique map of the world, of how they view things, how they view addiction, how they view recovery, all sorts of stuff. So that's very important to understand. And then people make the best choices given their present model of their world. And if people are growing in life, then your model of the world should always be getting bigger and more accurate of like unfiltered reality. And so that's pretty fun to always. And then when you expand your model of the world and you expand your model of alcohol addiction, expand your model of all the recovery capital sources, and you just keep growing in all the biopsychosocial, environmental, and spiritual, then eventually that alcohol salience goes way, 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 way down. And your, like I said, your model of the world is, you can optimize that for as many days as you're alive. You can continue to get a better and more accurate model of the world, a more fruitful and empowering one for quitting drinking, staying quit, and doing anything else in life too that you want. And then here's really something important, and I see this a whole lot: ambiguity. That's when the pain and the pleasure that someone associates to alcohol or any other substance or behavior are approximately equal, not identical, but approximately. If they're identical or close to it, that's the worst ambiguity. If you view alcohol as a 7 out of 10 pain and pleasure, and could everybody make sure that they're muted, please? And then a 7 out of 10 pain and negative consequences, then there's not really any, it's basically kind of a cancel out. So instead of there being a net increase to your quality of life with alcohol or a net decrease, it's like flat, even. So it's then people really get stuck in there because alcohol can be so addictive. And if it's not clear at all whether it's a problem or a benefit, if it's kind of like canceling it out, then I've seen that ambiguity from very approximately close pain and pleasure neuroassociations. People will continue to kick the can down the road and then put off quitting, or they'll quit, but they'll do a half measure or a quarter measure when oftentimes takes a full measure of attempting detox and recovery, and a full measure that's sustained over a not insignificant amount of time. For example, Randy has been, almost 30 days. That has been a tremendous, just continuing forward, despite all these things happening. And so as long as you keep going with it, all the stuff gets so much easier. I think Randy even said that recently the pleasure that he associated to alcohol went way down, and then the pain that he associated with it and negative consequences went way up, and that's major progress. Right. And so, yeah, neuro-associative conditioning, that's basically conditioning our brain's pain and pleasure neuroassociations to the ones that are better suited for changing our behavior. Behavior modification, one way to do it is neuro-associative conditioning. If everything we do is to avoid pain and or gain pleasure, and we'll do a lot more to avoid pain, then we can use that to change our behaviors. And I gave examples last week how my neuroassociations from several times in life, in fact, changed powerfully in like one day. One time when I was fat shamed in the morning, and then later on in that same day in the evening by two friends. Before I linked some pain to overeating and getting a pretty significant sized belly for the first time in my life. But I linked a lot of pleasure and benefits to it and not a lot of pain at that point. But being fat shamed twice in one day, that was helpful for me because, yeah, it stung a little bit, but it helped to fire me up and remember my high standards for health and fitness. And so then all of a sudden, I had a complete shift of neuroassociations. just in that one day, the second time it happened where someone called me out on my weight gain, my neuroassociations went overeating, comfort eating, massive pain. And then, looking good without a shirt off like I did in the past, massive pleasure. And so the next day I went right back to the gym, and within, I don't know, a couple of weeks, I had lost that belly. And within maybe 5 weeks only, I was already building a lot of muscle because of muscle memory and because I had so much extra fat to turn into muscle, which I had never had in the past. And then I remember 5 weeks later, one of my mom's herb students at their natural healing school was like, "Whoa, have you been working out?" Because it's the first time she had seen me since. And so that was huge positive reinforcement. And that just further strengthened the conditioning of those neuroassociations to continue to be conducive to being consistent with diet and fitness. The only way you'll make long-term changes is to raise your standards. So for example, we don't get what we want in life. We don't get what we get what we must have. So there's one of the things we're going to cover towards the end is the 6 high performance habits. And this is based on a lot of science and research too, which is amazing. One of those is raise necessity. And so between raising necessity, raising our standards, these are things that we actually have a lot of agency over. And then once you know about these different parameters that you have, you can add them to your, addiction recovery dashboard, referential index, and then you can pull them up. And just the more resources you have, inner, outer, your network, your finances, your supplements, but the best thing is your inner, your mindset, your spirituality, your attitude, your character. You work on that. And that's why this whole course right here is mental mastery, make alcohol moot, because you could have the best alcohol withdrawal remedies, the best alcohol craving reduction supplements, and the best therapist, the best coach, all that kind of stuff. But if your mind is still in a place of, a victim mindset and a fixed mindset, and you just got a really bad attitude and really negative, then all those other things might not even be enough to make long-term sustained recovery from addiction, because the mind thing is just so important. And they're all important. We're mind, body, and spirit, and they're all equally important and intertwined so much. And so the best neuroassociations for quitting alcohol or anything else forever is to link only a 1 out of 10 pleasure and a 10 out of 10 pain. Super simple math that even I can do. And then the pain pleasure balance, I talked about that. And one of the ways you can reset actually the pain pleasure balance. So many Americans and people in the West, and even in the East actually now with technology, in China, all sorts of places. Maybe it's global now, apart from all the people that are living on less than $10 a day, which is a big part of the population. But now so many citizens of Earth have this pain pleasure balance that's really heavily, the gremlins are camped out there. There was one slide in Dr. Anna Lemke's slide deck where it showed the gremlins had not only multiplied to sit on the pain side of the balance beam, so you're feeling all this pain, but they had brought a U-Haul and a barbecue. They're like camping out and living there. So the only way you can feel pleasure in that case is to keep drinking or to quit drinking and then smoke a bunch of cigarettes and caffeine, right? That's what I did. I quit hard stuff with lots of Valium and cigarettes and caffeine. And then using all those things to quit the hard stuff, then one by one, I quit cigarettes and then I quit all the other. Then the last thing I cut out was sugar. And of course, that didn't last all these last 12 years. But I mean, that was an amazing sequence of quitting hard stuff all at once with less hard things. And then one by one, just coming off of all those things. So then after you have gone a period where you don't have any of that stuff, the instant pleasures, tapping on the pleasure side, Dr. Anna Lemke calls it a 30-day dopamine detox. And I don't think she invented that term, but she has done a lot of research on it, and she's had a lot of success with her patients and clients doing this, because once you stop the alcohol for 30 days, and each person's different. For some people, it's only 1 or 2 weeks. For some people, it's 2 months. For some people, it's longer. For a lot of people, it's around 2 or 3 or 4 weeks when they quit drinking. 2 or 3 or 4 weeks later, or 1 week if they're like young and super healthy and fit. A lot of variables in this, but after a while, your brain abstinence from alcohol, from the other substances, resets the brain's pain pleasure balance. Then, after you have done that, and even while you're doing that as well, you can do something called hormesis. That's intentionally seeking out pain. So her little cat in the hat Dr. Seuss thing that rhymes is abstain. So don't drink alcohol. Maintain, that's continue to stay alcohol free, and then seek out pain. And so that's tapping on the pain side, e.g., thermal stress with like sauna or cold shower or another type of cold therapy, or hardcore deliberate practice, meditation, reading a really hard, difficult book that's very good for your personal growth. Those are all hormesis that after you're doing them, then you get this huge boost of the pleasure. So that is an excellent formula. Abstain, maintain, and then seek out pain.